I should have known something was up that night. It was just after midnight, and I'd fallen asleep on the couch after watching some old action movie I'd seen a dozen times before. The sudden knock at the front door jolted me awake. At first, I thought it was my imagination, just the sound of the TV getting into my dreams. But no, it came again, loud and clear. 3 hard knocks, like someone was angry. Groggy and irritated, I stumbled to the door, wondering who in their right mind would show up at this hour. I opened it to see a guy standing there. Mid-30s, slick-looking, expensive suit, hair a little too perfect for this time of night. He looked like someone who'd stepped out of one of Megan's glossy magazines. For a second, I thought he was lost or a salesman with terrible timing. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice thick with sleep and annoyance. The guy smirked, glancing over my shoulder like he was expecting someone else. "Yeah, I'm here to see Megan. Is she around?" My brain tried to catch up. Megan? Who was this guy? And why was he standing on my porch at midnight asking for my wife? "She's not here," I said, frowning, trying to make sense of it. "Can I ask who you are?" "Oh," he said, cocking his head slightly like I'd missed something obvious. "You must be Sam. I'm a friend of Megan's." "A friend?" I repeated, feeling a prick of something in my gut that I didn't like. He gave me this lazy grin, completely unfazed. "Yeah, I was just stopping by to drop something off. Guess I'll have to catch her later." With that, he handed me an envelope, winked, and turned back toward a sleek, dark sedan idling at the curb. I stood there holding the envelope, feeling like I'd just walked into a scene I wasn't supposed to be a part of. Before I could ask him anything else, he'd slipped into the car and disappeared into the night. I shut the door, suddenly wide awake, staring at the envelope in my hand. It was plain white, my wife's name scribbled on it in a handwriting I didn't recognize. No return address. I should have waited. I should have left it on the counter for Megan to deal with in the morning, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single piece of paper, typed out in some strange, formal language. But one line stood out, one that made my blood run cold. "Thank you for the unforgettable weekend, darling. I'm counting down the days till our next." The rest was a blur. I stayed up all night, sitting at the kitchen table, turning that single sheet of paper over and over in my hands. I read the line 100 times, "Thank you for the unforgettable weekend, darling. I'm counting down the days till our next." I kept thinking it had to be some kind of mistake, that there was some logical explanation. Maybe this guy got the wrong address, or he was playing a twisted joke. But as the hours crawled by, none of those explanations seemed plausible. The door opened around 7 a.m., just as the sun was coming up. Megan walked in quietly, like she was hoping not to wake anyone. She looked fresh, too fresh for someone coming home after a girls' weekend. Her hair was neatly brushed, makeup flawless, a glow in her cheeks that didn't come from a sleepless night with friends. I hadn't moved since she walked in, and she froze when she saw me sitting there, her smile fading as her eyes met mine. "Morning," she said cautiously, setting her bag down on the counter. "Didn't expect you to be up this early." I couldn't bring myself to answer. I just held up the note, watching her face as she realized what it was. Her eyes widened slightly, but she kept her composure. She didn't even reach for the note, just stared at it like it might burn her. "What's this?" I finally managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. She glanced away, her mouth tightening. "Where did you get that?" I laughed, probably more bitterly than I intended. "A guy knocked on the door around midnight, asking for you. He handed this to me when I told him you weren't here." There was a long, uncomfortable silence. I waited for her to explain, to tell me there was some mistake, but all she did was look down, her cheeks flushed in a way that made my gut twist. "Sam." "I don't know what to say," she whispered, finally looking up at me, and I saw something there that I hadn't seen before. Guilt, plain as day. "You could start by telling me the truth," I replied, hearing the edge in my voice. "Who was he, Megan? And what is this?" She looked down again, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the edge of the counter. I knew her well enough to see she was fighting back tears, but sympathy wasn't what I felt. I felt anger, cold, sharp, like a knife pressing into my ribs. I wanted her to deny it, to say it was some misunderstanding, but she didn't. After a long, painful pause, she spoke. "He's just someone I met a few months ago." Her voice was barely above a whisper, and she didn't look me in the eye. "Someone you met?" I repeated, feeling a hot surge of anger flare up. "That's all you're going to say? Someone you met? What the hell does that even mean, Megan?" She flinched, but still wouldn't look at me. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice shaking. It happened, okay? I don't know what else to say." I slammed my fist on the table, unable to hold back the rage bubbling up inside me. "You don't know what else to say? How about starting with why? Why did you do this, Megan? Was there something missing in our marriage? Was I not enough for you?" She shook her head, looking up at me with tears streaming down her face. "No, Sam, it's not about that. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was just bored, or maybe I wanted to feel something different. I don't know." Her words hit me like a slap in the face. Bored. She was bored. All those years, all the memories, the life we built together, and she was bored. I clenched my fists, struggling to keep myself from shouting, but it felt like a dam had burst inside me. "You wanted to feel something different?" I echoed, my voice shaking. "Is that what this is about? You wanted a thrill, so you threw away everything we had?" Megan took a deep breath, wiping the tears from her face. "It wasn't like that, Sam. I didn't plan this. It just happened." "That's your excuse?" I scoffed. "It just happened?" She nodded, looking defeated, but there was something else there too, something I couldn't quite place. It was almost like relief. Like some part of her was glad it was out in the open now. "Who is he?" I demanded, unable to keep the venom out of my voice. "I want to know who this guy is." She hesitated, biting her lip. "His name is Nick. He's a friend." I laughed bitterly, the word echoing hollowly in the kitchen. "A friend? Really? Does he knock on all his friends' doors at midnight with love letters?" She winced, but didn't answer. "So, what now?" I asked, my voice low. "Am I supposed to just sit here and accept this?" She looked down, not answering. I realized she hadn't thought this far ahead. Maybe she hadn't expected to get caught, or maybe she didn't care. Either way, I knew I couldn't let this go. "I want the truth," I said, my voice cold. "How long has this been going on?" Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, and I saw the hesitation there, the guilt. She took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "A few months." "A few months?" The words tasted like poison in my mouth. "All those nights you said you were working late? All those girls' weekends? They were all lies, weren't they?" She nodded slowly, not meeting my eyes. It felt like a punch to the gut, the realization that she'd been lying to me for months, that every business dinner and weekend with the girls had been a cover for her affair. "And you just, what? Thought I'd never find out?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger. She looked away, her silence telling me everything I needed to know. She hadn't thought I'd find out. She'd assumed I'd just keep trusting her, keep believing the lies. And maybe I would have, if it weren't for that guy showing up on our doorstep. "I didn't want to hurt you, Sam," she whispered, her voice filled with regret. I laughed bitterly. "Well, congratulations. You managed to do it anyway." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was thick, heavy with all the things left unsaid. I wanted to scream, to rage, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she'd caused me. But instead, I just sat there, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. After a long pause, Megan finally looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Sam. I know I messed up. I don't know what I was thinking, or why I did it, but I'm sorry." "Sorry?" I repeated, shaking my head. You think sorry is going to fix this? She flinched, but didn't answer. And in that moment, I realized that I couldn't stand to look at her, couldn't stand to be in the same room as her. I got up, walked to the door, and grabbed my keys. Where are you going? She asked, her voice filled with panic. I didn't answer. I just opened the door and walked out, leaving her standing there, her face pale, her eyes filled with tears. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. All I knew was that I couldn't stay there, couldn't stand the sight of her, couldn't bear the thought of what she'd done. I got in my car and drove, the anger and hurt bubbling inside me, threatening to consume me. I didn't know how long I drove, didn't pay attention to where I was going. All I knew was that I needed to get away, to clear my head, to try and make sense of the chaos that had taken over my life. But no matter how far I drove, no matter how hard I tried to outrun it, the pain was always there, gnawing at me, reminding me of the betrayal I could never forget. I didn't go far, just drove around the neighborhood, looping aimlessly, trying to cool down. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. By the time I got back, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to let her off easy with half-answers and sob stories. I was going to drag every truth out of her, no matter what it took. I stepped through the door, and there she was, sitting at the kitchen table, the envelope still on the counter next to her, unopened. She looked up, startled, when she saw me come back, her face pale. She'd probably expected me to be gone longer, or maybe even not come back at all. But now, here I was, standing in front of her, and I could see the fear in her eyes. Why him? I asked, my voice flat. Why Nick? She looked away, fiddling with her hands. I don't know. He was just there. It wasn't about him, really, it was something different. Something different, I repeated, feeling the anger bubbling up again. That's your excuse? You were bored, so you decided to throw our marriage away for a fling? She flinched at my words, but I didn't care. I wanted her to feel it, to understand just how much damage she'd done. It wasn't a fling, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. It was more than that. That hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd been holding on to the hope that maybe it was just a meaningless thing, a stupid mistake. But her saying it was more than that made it feel 100 times worse. So, you're telling me you actually had feelings for this guy? I demanded, my voice rising. She looked down, not answering, and that was all the confirmation I needed. How long has it been going on? I asked, my voice cold. A few months, she admitted, still not looking at me. A few months, I repeated, feeling the anger surge inside me. So, what? You've just been lying to me this whole time. Every time you left for a girls' weekend or a business trip, was that just an excuse to go see him? She nodded, her face pale. It wasn't planned, Sam. It just happened. Don't give me that "it just happened" crap, I snapped, my fists clenching. You made a choice, Megan. You decided to go behind my back, to lie to me over and over again. Don't act like you didn't know exactly what you were doing. She looked up, her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Sam. I never wanted to hurt you. Well, congratulations, I said bitterly. You did. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other. I could see the guilt in her eyes, but it didn't make me feel any better. If anything, it just made me angrier, knowing that she felt bad but had done it anyway. Tell me everything, I demanded, my voice hard. I want to know every single detail. Don't hold back. She looked like she wanted to protest, but she must have known I wouldn't let it go. With a sigh, she nodded, taking a shaky breath before she started talking. I met him at a conference a few months ago, she began. It was just casual at first. We'd talk during breaks, have lunch together. But after the conference ended, we kept in touch. It started with emails, then texts, and then it just escalated. Escalated? I echoed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. That's one way to put it. She winced but kept talking. I didn't mean for it to go this far, Sam. I know that sounds like an excuse, but it's the truth. At first, it was just nice talking to someone new. I felt like he understood me in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. So, what? I shot back. You felt like I didn't understand you? She looked down, her silence answering my question. I felt a fresh wave of anger wash over me, but I held it back, forcing myself to stay calm. Go on, I said, my voice cold. She hesitated before continuing. We started meeting up, whenever I had a work trip or he did. It was just easier that way. No one would question it, you know? But it wasn't just physical. We'd talk about everything, our lives, our dreams, things I hadn't thought about in years. And I'm supposed to just sit here and listen to this? I snapped, unable to keep the anger out of my voice. She looked up, her eyes pleading. I know this doesn't make it right, Sam. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. But I don't know how to explain it. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in so long. Alive? I repeated, my voice dripping with disdain. So, what? Our life wasn't good enough for you? The life we built together, the memories we made, all of that meant nothing to you? She shook her head, her voice trembling. No, Sam, it meant everything. But I felt like I was losing myself. Like I didn't even know who I was anymore. That's a load of crap, I snapped. You're trying to justify it, but there's no justification for what you did. You made a choice, Megan. You chose to betray me, to lie to me over and over again. I know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't expect you to forgive me. I laughed bitterly. Forgive you? You think that's what this is about? This isn't about forgiveness, Megan. This is about respect, trust. You threw all of that away for some cheap thrill, and now you want me to just forgive you? She didn't answer, just looked down, her face pale. What happens now? She asked after a long silence, her voice barely above a whisper. What happens now? I echoed, my voice cold. I'll tell you what happens now. We're done. You've made it perfectly clear that I mean nothing to you, that our marriage means nothing to you. So, go ahead. Go be with him if that's what you want. But don't expect me to just sit here and pretend like everything's okay. She looked up, her eyes wide with shock. You're ending it? What did you expect? I shot back, feeling the anger flare up again. Did you think I'd just sit here and let you keep lying to me? Did you think I'd just forgive and forget? She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, Sam, I didn't. You just what? I demanded, my voice hard. You just thought I'd keep putting up with it? That I'd just ignore the fact that you've been sneaking around with another man for months? She didn't answer, just looked down, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. But I didn't feel sorry for her. If anything, I felt disgusted, knowing that she'd done this to me, that she'd lied to me over and over again. So, what now? She asked after a long silence, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, I said coldly. But I know one thing, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like everything's okay. You made your choice, Megan. Now you have to live with it. She looked up, her eyes filled with desperation. Sam, please. I know I messed up, but I still love you. I laughed bitterly. Love? You don't even know what that word means. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have lied to me, wouldn't have thrown away everything we had. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice trembling. I know that doesn't make it right, but I am. Sorry doesn't change anything, I shot back. You think saying sorry is going to make it all better? You think it's going to fix the damage you've done? She didn't answer, just looked down, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Megan, I said after a long silence, my voice cold. But I know one thing, I'm not going to let you keep lying to me, keep betraying me. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. She nodded, her face pale, her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, she whispered again, her voice barely audible. But her apology felt hollow, meaningless, like a cheap attempt to make herself feel better. I walked to the door, grabbing my keys, unable to look at her any longer. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice filled with panic. "I don't know," I replied, my voice cold. "But I know one thing, I can't stay here, not with you. Not after everything you've done." I walked out, leaving her standing there, her face pale, her eyes filled with tears. I didn't know where I was going, or what I was going to do. All I knew was that I couldn't stay, couldn't bear the thought of being in the same room as her, knowing the betrayal that lay between us. And as I walked away, a part of me knew that things would never be the same again. After I left the house, I spent hours just driving, watching the road stretch out ahead, trying to numb myself to the storm in my mind. But as much as I tried to stay calm, one thought wouldn't let me go: she got to live in that house, surrounded by the life we'd built together, while I was the one out here, feeling humiliated. She had lied, she had made her choices, and now she was the one who'd have to face the consequences. I pulled off the road near a small diner, figuring coffee would help me think. Inside, the hum of chatter and the smell of burnt coffee filled the place, grounding me just enough to start piecing together a plan. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. If she thought she could keep everything, stay in our home, and slip right back into her routine, she had another thing coming. As I sat in the booth, I called my friend Mike, someone I knew would understand and be ready to help without asking 100 questions. We hadn't talked much since he moved out to his family's cabin a few months back, but he was the one person I trusted completely. "Sam," he said after I laid out the basics, his voice heavy with concern. "You sure about this? You want to go down that road?" "I don't want to, Mike," I replied, gripping my coffee cup. "But she left me no choice. She betrayed me, lied to my face. I can't just let that go." There was a pause on his end, but eventually, he sighed. "All right. Tell me what you need." Over the next hour, we hammered out a plan, practical and brutal. I wasn't going to be reckless, I'd make sure this was methodical, something she'd never see coming until it hit her square in the face. We were going to start by gathering evidence, anything that would make this whole mess work in my favor legally. Mike's brother worked for a private investigation firm and knew people who specialized in collecting dirt without leaving a trail. The first order of business was information. I needed every scrap of evidence, every text, photo, and record of her little affair with Nick. If I was going to go down this path, I was going to do it with a stack of hard facts that no one, not even Megan's friend, could dispute. When I got back to the house that night, Megan was asleep, or at least pretending to be. I could tell by her breathing that she was still awake. I went into the guest room and shut the door, not ready to deal with her yet. The next morning, I left early, heading straight to Mike's cabin. I spent the day going over what we'd need to make this airtight, my anger simmering into a cold resolve. A couple of days later, I reached out to Mike's contact. He was a no-nonsense guy named Craig, the kind of guy who didn't ask why you wanted the information, just how much you were willing to pay. Craig assured me he'd have everything ready in about a week. I didn't tell him why, and he didn't need to know, he just nodded, scribbling notes in a battered notebook. I left feeling a strange sense of satisfaction, like I'd finally taken the first step toward taking back control. Over the next few days, I went about my usual routine, acting like everything was normal. Megan seemed to think my calmness meant I was moving on, or maybe even forgiving her. She tried to talk to me a few times, but I shut her down every time. I wasn't interested in her apologies or explanations. I just wanted her to feel what I was feeling, every ounce of betrayal, every bit of broken trust. Finally, Craig called. He had everything: texts, photos, dates, even hotel records. I was stunned at how thorough he'd been. Every single lie Megan had told me was there in black and white, indisputable proof of her betrayal. There was something deeply satisfying in seeing it all laid out like that, like it made everything real, stripped her lies down to cold, hard facts. I picked up the file from Craig in a nondescript envelope, the weight of it heavy in my hands as I drove home. Inside, Megan was in the kitchen, cooking dinner like nothing had happened. She glanced at me as I walked in but quickly looked away, sensing something was off. "Sam, you okay?" she asked, her voice hesitant. I didn't answer, just went to the office and shut the door. I laid out the papers on the desk, each one adding another layer of anger to the pit in my stomach. I'd collected every piece of evidence I needed. Now it was time to decide what to do with it. The next day, I reached out to a lawyer, someone I'd found through one of Mike's connections. His name was Arnold, and from the way he handled the initial consultation, I could tell he was sharp. He looked over the file with a nod, a slight smile flickering at the corners of his mouth as he skimmed through the evidence. "This is rock solid, Sam," he said, pushing the papers back toward me. "You can use this to get the upper hand in a divorce, no question. If she's the one who broke the trust, you stand a very good chance of keeping the house, at the very least. And depending on her income, we could talk about spousal support too." The idea of her paying me alimony almost made me laugh. I didn't care about the money, but the thought of her funding my life after what she'd done was a twisted kind of justice. We went over the details, laying out a plan that would leave no room for her to fight back. If she thought I was just going to quietly leave and hand her everything, she was in for a rude awakening. Arnold had another suggestion too, filing a formal request to have Nick's name included in the divorce proceedings. It wasn't something I'd even thought about, but Arnold assured me it would strengthen my case, putting her infidelity front and center in the court documents. He even suggested I consider a restraining order if it seemed like Nick might interfere. I wasn't sure I wanted to go that far, but I liked knowing I had the option. The next few days were a blur of preparations. I had to get my own finances in order, make sure I had access to everything I needed. I started packing some of my things, anything I knew I'd want if I ended up leaving for good. Megan noticed, of course, but she didn't ask. I think she'd started to realize that my silence wasn't a good sign. Then came the hardest part, waiting. We were scheduled to file everything by the end of the week, but Arnold wanted to make sure every last detail was in place before we moved forward. I went through the motions, keeping up the appearance of normalcy while my mind was spinning with the thought of what was about to happen. Every time I looked at Megan, I felt a fresh wave of anger, but I held it in, knowing it would all be worth it soon enough. The night before the filing, I decided to let her see just a hint of what was coming. She was in the living room, flipping through a magazine, and I walked in, sitting down across from her. She looked up, surprised. We hadn't spoken in days. "Sam," she said cautiously, "is everything okay?" I leaned forward, meeting her gaze. "I just want you to know, Megan. I'm done playing games." She looked confused, but I could see a flicker of fear in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "You're going to find out soon enough," I said, keeping my voice calm. "But let's just say this, you're not going to come out of this the way you think." Her face went pale, her hands shaking slightly as she set the magazine down. "Sam, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about consequences, Megan," I replied coldly. "Something you didn't seem to consider when you decided to betray me." She tried to argue, to say something that would make it all go away, but I cut her off. I didn't care what she had to say anymore. I'd given her enough chances, enough patience, and now it was time for her to face the reality of what she'd done. As I went to bed that night, I felt a strange sense of peace. I'd been through hell these past few weeks, but now I knew that, one way or another, I was going to make sure she felt every bit of the pain she'd caused me. Tomorrow, everything would change, and there would be no turning back. The morning I filed for divorce, I felt more focused than I had in weeks. Everything was in place, every document signed, every last piece of evidence ready. My lawyer, Arnold, called to confirm that the papers had been filed. Megan would be served within a few hours. It was a strange feeling, knowing the countdown had officially started. She had no idea her world was about to crash down. Around noon, I went home to be there when she got served. I wanted to see her face when she read those papers. As I stepped through the door, Megan was in the kitchen, looking up from her laptop with a casual smile that made my stomach turn. "Home early today?" she asked, sounding a bit surprised but friendly, almost like nothing had happened between us. "I have something to take care of," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. She looked confused but went to answer it, leaving me standing just a few feet behind her, watching her face as she opened the door to a man in a suit holding an envelope. He asked if she was Megan, confirmed her identity, and then handed her the papers with a polite, "You've been served, ma'am." For a moment, she just stood there, staring at the envelope like she couldn't quite process what had just happened. I stayed silent, watching as she closed the door and walked back into the kitchen, the shock on her face quickly turning to panic. "Sam," she said, her voice trembling as she looked at me, "what is this?" "You know exactly what it is," I replied, my voice cold. "It's the consequences of your choices." Her hands shook as she tore open the envelope, her eyes skimming over the words, her face growing paler by the second. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear. "You're divorcing me," she whispered, as if she could barely believe it. "After everything you've done, did you really think I wouldn't?" I asked, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "But Sam, please, can we just talk about this?" "We can work through this," she started, her voice desperate. "Work through this?" I interrupted, feeling my anger flare. "You spent months lying to me, sneaking around with someone else, and you think we can just work through this?" Tears started to form in her eyes, but they didn't move me. I'd seen her cry too many times before, had listened to her apologies that meant nothing. This time, I was done. "I'm sorry, Sam. I know I messed up, I know I hurt you, but I love you," she stammered, her voice choked with emotion. "We can go to counseling, or whatever you want. Just give me a chance to make this right." "Make this right?" I laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Megan, you destroyed our marriage the second you decided to betray me. There's no going back from that." She looked down, defeated, the papers still clutched in her trembling hands. I could see she was struggling, searching for something, anything, to say that might change my mind. But there was nothing she could say, nothing that would undo the damage she'd done. "What about the house?" she asked quietly, almost to herself, as if she were just beginning to realize the full impact of what was happening. And everything we've built?" "I've already discussed it with my lawyer," I replied coolly. "The house is mine. You forfeited your right to it the moment you decided to throw everything away." Her face went pale, her mouth opening and closing as she tried to respond, but no words came out. I watched as she realized that her actions had left her with nothing, that the life she'd taken for granted was slipping out of her grasp. "You can pack up your things and leave," I continued. "I've given you enough time to explain yourself, to apologize, to fix this. But you made your choice. Now you can live with it." "Please, Sam," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't have anywhere to go." "You should have thought of that before," I replied, unmoved. "You chose Nick over me. Maybe he has a place for you." Her face crumpled, the tears now flowing freely. "Sam, please. I know I messed up, but I never wanted this. I never wanted to lose you." "Then you should have thought about that before you decided to betray me," I said, my voice hard as steel. "I'm done, Megan. I've given you enough chances, and you threw every one of them away." She sank down into a chair, clutching the papers in her hands, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed. But her tears didn't touch me. I was past feeling sorry for her, past caring about her pain. She'd caused this, and now she was going to have to face the consequences. After a few moments, she looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "What about us, Sam? What about all the years we spent together? Don't those mean anything to you?" "They meant everything to me, Megan," I replied, my voice cold. "But clearly, they didn't mean anything to you." She started to say something, but I cut her off. "I want you out by the end of the week. I'll stay somewhere else until then, but when I come back, I expect you to be gone." Her mouth dropped open, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Sam, you can't do this. This is our home." "No, it's my home," I corrected her. "You just lived here. But now, you can find somewhere else to live." Her face twisted in pain, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed openly. But her tears didn't move me. I felt nothing but satisfaction, knowing that she was finally facing the reality of what she'd done. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. She just sat there, her face buried in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. I watched her, feeling a strange sense of closure. She'd spent months lying to me, betraying me, and now she was finally paying the price. After a while, I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her there with her guilt and her regret. I didn't look back, didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing any sign of weakness. This was the end of us, and I was done with her lies, her excuses, her tears. As I walked out of the house, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was over. The lies, the betrayal, the pain, none of it mattered anymore. I was free, and I was finally ready to move on. When I reached my car, I sat there for a moment, taking a deep breath. I thought I'd feel empty, or maybe even angry, but all I felt was relief. I'd done what needed to be done. Megan was out of my life, and I was finally free from the weight of her betrayal. As I drove away, I didn't look back. The house, our memories, the life we'd built together, they were all behind me now. I didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a future worth looking forward to. I spent the next few days holed up at a hotel a few miles from the house. It felt strange, being away from home, but I needed the time and space to clear my head. As the hours passed, the enormity of what had happened finally started to sink in. The anger had faded, replaced by something quieter, a dull ache that wouldn't quite go away. Megan called a few times, but I ignored every attempt. She sent a handful of texts too, mostly apologies and pleas to talk. Each time my phone buzzed, I felt a small surge of satisfaction, knowing she was desperate. But I wasn't interested in hearing anything she had to say. I knew her words would only be more excuses, more half-hearted attempts to shift the blame. I'd had enough of that. A week passed, and on the final day, I called Mike, letting him know I was planning to go back to the house to check if Megan had actually left. He offered to come with me, which was probably for the best. I didn't know what state I'd find things in, and having him there felt like a backup plan. We pulled into the driveway, and I took a moment before getting out, gathering my thoughts. I wasn't sure what I'd feel, stepping into the house we'd once shared, now empty of the life we'd built together. Mike didn't say anything, just patted my shoulder before we went in. Inside, the house was mostly quiet. Her scent lingered faintly, and her framed photos, once scattered around, were gone. I moved from room to room, checking drawers, cabinets, even the closets. It was as if Megan had been erased, just an empty space where she'd once been. In our bedroom, I found a note on the dresser. The handwriting was shaky, and the words rushed like she'd been desperate to get everything out before leaving. I almost didn't want to read it, knowing it would only stir up memories I was ready to leave behind, but I forced myself. Sam, the note began, I know this doesn't mean much now, but I'm so sorry for everything. I know I betrayed you, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I loved you, I still do, and I know that's probably hard to believe. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what we had. I don't know why I did it, I don't know if I ever will. But I want you to know that I'll always be grateful for what we shared, even if I ruined it. I'm sorry. I read it over twice, but her words only left me feeling cold. It was the same empty apology I'd heard a dozen times already, just written down instead of spoken. She hadn't taken responsibility, she'd just left the blame floating in the air, like some unsolvable mystery. The note was the end of her last attempt to make peace with herself, not with me. I crumpled it and tossed it in the trash, feeling the last remnants of sympathy for her disappear. As I turned to leave, I noticed she'd left something else, a small box, neatly wrapped, with my name scrawled on top. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Inside was a keychain I'd bought for her during our first anniversary trip, one she'd always kept on her car keys. I put the lid back on and left it on the dresser. Whatever sentimental meaning it once held was long gone now. I spent the rest of the day sorting through the house, taking stock of what I wanted to keep and what I'd need to get rid of. I threw out old letters, boxed up photos, removed every piece of Megan's presents from the rooms, determined to make a fresh start. Mike helped me with most of it, but by late afternoon, he had to head out, leaving me alone in the half-empty house. The quiet felt suffocating, but I forced myself to keep working, clearing the house of every reminder, every memory that had once meant so much but was now just an echo of a life that no longer existed. As night fell, I took a break, settling onto the couch with a bottle of bourbon and my phone. The silence weighed on me, the realization settling in that this was really it. Megan was gone, the life we'd built was over, and I was on my own. At some point, I picked up my phone and called my parents, filling them in on everything. They'd known something was wrong, but I hadn't told them the details until now. My mom was upset, but she didn't push, she just listened, offering quiet support. My dad, on the other hand, surprised me by saying he'd suspected something was off for a while. I never wanted to say anything, he admitted, his voice rough. I didn't want to interfere. But you deserve better than someone who'd treat you like that, Sam. You deserve someone who respects you. The words hit me harder than I expected. For the first time since this whole mess began, I felt a strange sense of clarity, a realization that maybe, just maybe, there was life after Megan. I thanked him and hung up, a weight lifted from my chest. The following morning, I sat down with Arnold to go over the last steps of the divorce. We discussed the terms, who'd get what I'd expect from her financially. Megan had agreed to everything without a fight, probably realizing she had no leverage, given the evidence I'd presented. Arnold walked me through the logistics, each step cementing the finality of it all. He assured me that within a few weeks, the paperwork would be finalized, and I'd be legally free. Later that day, I had one last task to take care of, reaching out to Nick. I hadn't planned on it initially, but after some thought, I decided it was necessary. He was just as responsible for this mess as Megan, and he deserved to know exactly what his actions had cost. I found his number from a recent call log and dialed. When he answered, there was a pause, like he was surprised anyone would be calling him directly. Hello? Nick, I said, keeping my voice calm. This is Sam. Megan's husband. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could almost feel his panic through the phone, but he didn't hang up. Listen, I continued, I'm not calling to scream at you. That's not my style. But I thought you should know Megan and I are done. Thanks to you, she's out of the house, and we're in the middle of a divorce. So, congratulations, I guess. You got what you wanted. Sam, he started, but I cut him off. I don't need an apology from you, Nick. Just wanted to let you know the damage you caused. I don't care what your intentions were, but understand that what you did has consequences. You can tell yourself whatever you want, but in the end, you're the guy who went after a married woman. That's on you. There was another pause, and then he finally spoke. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Yeah, well, it did, I replied coldly. And now you get to live with that. I hung up, feeling a strange satisfaction. It didn't change anything, but it felt like the last piece of the puzzle falling into place. I confronted him, let him know exactly what his actions had cost, and now, I could finally close the door on this chapter. The next few weeks passed in a blur. The divorce finalized without issue, the house emptied of Megan's things. I hired a cleaning crew, repainted the walls, replaced furniture, and removed every trace of the life we'd shared. By the time it was all done, the house looked new, like it belonged to someone else. I found myself oddly at peace, no longer haunted by the memories that once seemed so inescapable. One evening, I found myself flipping through an old album I'd missed during the cleanup. Inside were photos of trips, birthdays, all the milestones we'd shared. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness, but it was fleeting. Looking at the photos, I realized that they belonged to another time, to someone who no longer existed. Those memories were part of the past, a past I was finally ready to leave behind. In the end, the betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had forced me to face the truth, to let go of a life built on lies. And as I closed the album and placed it in the box of things to be donated, I knew I was ready to start over, to build a life that was real, honest, and finally, my own.